Alrighty, on to module 4, and we're going to look at the construct to be assessed when we do these assessments. What are we actually trying to measure? So what I'll have in this slide deck is various tests that are included on the available assessments that you can do for your assessment assignment with your guinea pig, whoever that might be, your spouse, your friend, your parent, what have you. All right, so cognitive abilities. Tests of cognitive abilities can be general, just this is something you're going to do. So for example, there's some practice items you can give your assessee from the general aptitude test, which gets at total cognitive ability, or they can be really specific. So for example, there is this vocabulary or verbal test. If that's going to be something important to the position, you might choose to measure that instead. Personality. So we talked about the 5-factor model before briefly. This will sometimes just be called the Big Five. And again, here's our acronym of OCEAN. So openness to experience, which tends to be really correlated with things like intelligence, creativity, conscientiousness. Is that person going to be on top of things, very fastidious, careful about how they do things? Extroversion, are they outgoing? Are they sociable? Agreeableness, are they someone that it's easy to get along with? And then neuroticism is the only sort of negatively balanced one. Are there things that make this person particularly anxious, particularly sometimes mentally unstable? Now, in terms of personality, there are a whole host of different instruments that measure the Big Five, and some are longer, some are shorter. And so I've given you a whole bunch of examples here that you can use if you want to assess this. If you're going for specific high-risk jobs where you might be someone in charge of public safety, like a police officer or a firefighter, you will often undergo a more comprehensive personality assessment using something like the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. We're now on the 3rd edition of that. Because of legalities and what you're allowed to test or not test under the ADA, what typically happens for those roles is you're contingently hired and then you undergo that assessment. Basically, we don't want someone who's a psychopath or mentally unstable in any way being in charge of public safety. So part of the role of the psychologist in that case is to screen that out. Now, one of the things that you might be wondering as you look at the personality chapters and sections is, I've heard so much about the Myers-Briggs type inventory my entire life, and maybe you've even had to take it for one of your jobs. Why are we not talking about that? Well, the Myers-Briggs type inventory, or the MBTI, is not scientific. It was not created by psychologists. It was not created by scientists. It was two, I'm sure, very intelligent, lovely women whose last names were Myers and Briggs, who liked Carl Jung and liked his 8 personality types, but for some reason doubled them to 16. Another problem with the Myers-Briggs is that personality is supposed to be stable across our lifetime, and people who take the Myers-Briggs at different times can get different scores. So it's not really measuring personality. The way that I've learned about the Myers-Briggs, the way that I describe it to other people is it's about as valid as a BuzzFeed test or a horoscope. So you can take it for fun, but certainly we shouldn't be making employment decisions based on it. Now, what about fit between the person and the environment, right? We need to make sure not only is this person just potentially a good employee, but are they potentially a good employee here? I've been giving you some Virginia Wesleyan examples. This is more of an academia type example. But like when we interview potential faculty members, we not only have them do interviews, we also actually have them do a guest lecture, often talking about their research, but basically we're trying to see, can they teach? Because Virginia Wesleyan is all about teaching. We're a small liberal arts institution. And so that's a big piece of it. You want to make sure that person's going to work there. And so what you'll see is there's a whole host of assessments here that get at different aspects of this just congruency, right? Is it going to match, be congruent? There's a KSAO. I love that this one is made by State Farm, but this seems to be one of the best ones in the field. One of the things you might look at here is organizational citizenship behavior. Is that person going to be willing to be a good citizen of the organization, cooperate? Or are they going to engage in counterproductive workplace behavior? Part of what you might look at here as well is adaptability. And we'll talk about some of those things later in the semester as well. Now, physical capabilities are not always something a psychologist might be measuring. As you can see, these come out of medicine and exercise science. But if someone with a psychological background is doing the assessment in general, they might be in charge of sort of helping set this up. You need to do a really careful job analysis of physical jobs and demonstrate job relatedness because of things like the ADA, right? You can't just say someone who's going to be sitting at a desk the whole time and never have to carry anything needs to be able to carry 100 pounds, right? It's just not going to happen. So you have to demonstrate that job relatedness. You also need to consider environmental influence. Are people going to need to work in very hot or very cold temperatures? Will they need to use personal protective equipment, for example, in medicine or nuclear oversight? You need to be very, very careful because there's a lot of laws related to this. So it's the uniform guidelines of the EEOC from 1978. I keep bringing up the ADA. That's very important here. And there's lots and lots of case law around this that your chapter goes into that just say it has to be related to that job analysis. You can't just say, we need physical capabilities. Also, you might use composite predictors. And this is where you would use multiple tests or assessments, and then you'd use mathematical formulas to create one score from that. And that one score would help you make a hiring decision. The person who scored the highest, perhaps, would be the person you hired. And as your chapter says, this is done to accomplish the pragmatic goal of hiring decisions. And ideally, it makes it more objective. Alrighty, that is module 4. We're trucking along. We're keeping going.